Okay, welcome back, girls. Okay, I want us to look at this second example, but then before the example, I just want us to look at this table because this is the table that we're going to use. If you're solving anything that has to do with tax, there's always a tax band being given to you, which you're going to use to solve the questions that you're supposed to. But first of all, now, based on what we're having here, I explained earlier, I said, okay, if your amount is what ranging from what 1 to 400,000, the percent of tax being applied is 10%. If your money is 400% and above, then the amount of tax being paid is 20%. And then now take a look at this. This is the table. So now take a look at table 2. It what explains personal allowance, which say what with 100,000 plus 12% of total income. Then spouse allowance, that's if the person has a spouse, then it's 50,000. That's for one spouse only. Then child allowance is 40,000. Say for each child under 14 years of age, not exceeding 4 children. So even if the children are 6, you're going to what? You're going to say, okay, 40 times 4. Even if the children are 10, you're going to say 40 times 4. Because what? Is it not exceeding 4 children? So now, and then we have dependent relative of up to 60,000. And then we have what life insurance. The life insurance, it depends on what you're being given. But then what I want you to know is in this table 2 now, you're going to sum up everything and then subtract it from the total income. That's when you'll be able to know what you're going to as in use as a tax. As in we're going to find the tax. For example, now, based on what we're having here, if our money ranges between 300,000, that's after subtracting tax. That means what? Okay, if you look at the first tax band, 400,000, that means what? We are applying what? We are applying 10%. So now, let's take a look at this question. We are having, okay, in a situation where what? Where life insurance is being given, you're going to add the life insurance to all and then subtract, and then you know what you're having left. And then there are situations where okay, you're being asked what maybe possibly what spray what you have across the months. Because for example, now if you are being asked the question and say what, okay, find the tax per month. Now tax per month, that means okay, how much are you paying as a tax? And then what? Okay, in a month now, how much do you pay? Because most of the times, this tax sometimes is what? On a yearly basis. So now it's just for you to divide it by what? 12, because we have 12 months in a year. So now, first of all, now let's take a look at this question. The solution is say a man has a wife and 6 children. First of all, now the most important thing we need to take note of is what? Personal allowance. And then based on our table previously what? Seen, our personal allowance is what? We are having 100,000 plus 12% of total income. So we're now having okay 100,000 plus 12.5% of. Now, what is the total income here? They say what? Okay, how much does he pay in a year which he earns this? So this is what he earns. So now we have what? Okay, 670,000. Now this is what we are having here. So now this is for personal allowance. So I think possibly maybe we'll just simplify it, which is equal to what? Okay, we're having what? Okay, 100,000 plus, you know that what? Okay, finding this 18%, to make it more simple, you can just go directly by, you know that half is the same thing as 12.5 all over 100. Or you can what? Convert it to an improper fraction, then you divide it by what? 100, in which you will end up taking a reciprocal. So now I may decide to what? Go with okay 12.5% of 67000, which is equal to, we now have 100,000 plus, now this is the same thing as what, 12.5 divided by 100 times what, times 67000, which is equal to, we now have what, 100,000 plus, so now if we are having what, 12.5 divided by 100, which is equal to what, we are having 0.125 times 67000, which is equal to, please, I'm just trying to simplify it by making the step more longer, but then you can cut short some of the steps if you want. So we now have 100,000 plus, now if we now multiply this times 670,000, which is equal to, we have 83,750. That's a 3,750, which is equal to. So if you now add it now plus what, 100,000 now, you should be having what, 183,000. Okay, sorry, let me put the naira sign. 183,750. So now this is what is personal allowance now. So now you see what, the wife now, if we are dealing with spouse now, that means we now go with what, okay, and then we see that what, spouse allowance is what, 50,000. Let's just go directly by writing 50,000. And then now the question says he has 6 children. So now, okay, child allowance, let me just abbreviate this by writing E standing in for what, child allowance is equal to, okay, what are we having now? If you look at the table very well, we're having 40,000, you see, for each child. So we should be having what, okay, 40,000 for each child. And then the question says he has 6 children. So with these 6 children now, our attention is being drawn toward, okay, not exceeding 4 children. Since it's not exceeding 4 children, that means what, we are going to see multiply by 4. He's having 6 children, but then the question is that what, not exceed maximum of what, 4 children. So we cannot go beyond. Even if it's 10 children, we will what, multiply times 4. So if we now have what, okay, 40,000 times 4, that means we are having what, 160,000, which is equal to 160,000. And then they said that what, okay, he claims 32,000 for dependent relative. So can I write DP standing for what, dependent relative? Sorry, let me DR, dependent relative. So now for the dependent relative we say 32,000, that means 32,000. That's for what, a dependent relative. So now what we're going to do now is, okay, are we not having anything left again? You say, okay, how much tax does he pay? For example, now had it been insurance is being mentioned, now we will now what, add up insurance here as the next step. But since insurance is not mentioned, we'll leave it out. In a case where spouse is not being mentioned, you leave spouse out of it. In a case where dependent relative is not mentioned, you leave dependent relative out of it. You work with what? Only what you're being given in the question. So now these are what we have in the question. So now, okay, let's rearrange this by making it to be what? Okay, let's go with personal allowance is equal to, we have having what, 183,750. Then we are now having what, spouse, which is equal to, we are now having what, 50, okay, we are now having 50,000. And then we are now having what, child allowance, which is equal to what, 160,000. Then we now have dependent relative, which is equal to what? We're having 32,000. So now we are going to sum up the whole of this together. Okay, summing up everything that we have here, which is the personal allowance, spouse allowance, CE, which is the child allowance, and then what? The dependent relative. Now we are having 425,750. So now our attention is what? To know how much tax. But then you look at it from our formula, what is what? Our taxable income is equal to what? We are having total income minus what? Allowance. You can possibly see total allowance, but then our attention is here. So which is equal to what? We can go and say, okay, tax is equal to short form of this, because what is our total income? We are having what? 670,000 minus what's our allowance? We are having 425,750. So now this is what we're having. So from here now, which is equal to, so if we now say, okay, 670,000 minus 425,750, which is equal to, we are having what? 244,250. Now, let's take a look at this. This is the value that we're having here. But then, if you look at what? The first table, table 1, our money is what? 244,250. That means it falls within what? The first tax band, which is what? From 1 to 400,000. So that means we are going to find what? 10% of this amount here. So now we are going to say, well, okay, 10% of 244,250 is the same thing as what? 10 all over what? 100 times 244,250. Now, so this is what we're having. So we can see easily go, okay, 0 goes with this 0 goes with this. So which is the same thing as well. Okay, 1 times what? 1 times 24425, which is the same thing as what? We are having what? 24. That's 24,425. That means what? This is the tax that the person pays, because you see what? Okay, how much tax does he pay in a year? So now this is the tax in which he pays in a year. So now, in addition, maybe someone can decide to say, okay, how much does he pay in a month? Then you can decide to go with what? Okay, divide by 12 to know how much he pays in a month. So now, in conclusion to this question now, the most important thing that I want you to take note of here is what? If a wife is being mentioned or spouse is being mentioned, then you use the value. If children are not mentioned, you leave it out. So you only work with what the question says. If the question says it's only a man, and then it also talks about dependent relative, that means you're going with what? Personal allowance and dependent relative only. But in a case where what? Dependent relative is not mentioned and then child allowance is mentioned, that means you go with the man's personal allowance and then child allowance. In a case of what? In a situation where spouse is mentioned, child allowance is mentioned, dependent relative is mentioned, and then what? And then we have life insurance is being mentioned. That means you're going to what? Sum all of them. But note that what? This table can be given, can be changed. It's not constant. So in case of maybe if something like this shows up, it is for you to what? Use the values which you have, which is being given to you on the question. Because what, it can be reduced. I can decide to use what? Okay, 20,000 for child allowance. I can decide to use what? 30,000 for dependent relative. So now, okay, we have come to the end of this. But then we're going to what? Go to the next topic. There's a video that I'm still going to make. But then please, you can what? Do well by subscribing to the YouTube channel. Thank you.